Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Asus Zephyrus G15 on the left and the Gigabyte Aero 15 on the right. Now, I did compare these previously, but the Aero is an upgrade. We've got the XC model, which retails for $2,200 as opposed to the $1,800 US that the G15 retails for. Key difference between this model and the KC that I covered previously is that it has Nvidia's RTX 3070 as well as 32 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte NVMe, where the KC had only 16 gigs of RAM, of course a 3060, and a half terabyte NVMe. Otherwise, the machine is identical, same CPU, so the G15 still has the more powerful, especially per watt, AMD CPU over the Intel chip on the right in the Aero. But we do have a little bit more RAM here, same GPU, quite different displays, yet both very appealing. And that's where we're going to start. A 15.6-inch, 16 by 9, 165 hertz refresh rate, QHD color accurate panel on the left. It is IPS, that's why it looks a little washed out already. And then we've got a 15.6-inch 4K, also 16 by 9, 60 hertz OLED panel on the right, which is brighter. This panel tops out at a little over 300 nits, this over 400. So with the OLED inherently, even though it only has a 60 hertz refresh rate, there are a lot of advantages. But of course, the main advantage of the G15 is its refresh rate. Let's go ahead and take a look and a listen. And we'll stop it right there. Hopefully that demonstrates the point that I think is very obvious, which again, both displays are great. I think they favor different users, but of course overlap, because these are two of the best offerings I think ever made for both gaming and content creation alike. So what it comes down to with the display, in my opinion, is really simple. If you are going to do the majority of your gaming on the panel and you need that higher refresh rate, go with the G15. The G15's panel is color accurate. I don't think that its brightness level is a problem. I actually think it's quite good. I have very little backlight bleed. A lot of you have been concerned about that. So that should give you some peace of mind. On the other hand, if like me, you aren't going to do the majority of the gaming or even content creation for that matter on the panel that either machine has, then I think the Aero 15 is the better choice because you're getting a better display for general use. The 4K OLED on here is stunning. It's a Samsung panel. For those of you worried about burn-in, I've only had burn-in on LG TVs. I'm not saying that I haven't seen burn-in on Samsung phones, but I haven't personally experienced it. And I've been using Samsung phones for, well, almost a decade in terms of OLED based. So I know it happens, but you've got to have some pretty bad luck. I'm not saying I can guarantee anything. By the way, I'm not affiliated with either of these companies. I purchased these both for review purposes to figure out which one would be right for me. The point I'm getting at is that if you're going to be hooked up to an external monitor, it may not matter at all. But I personally would rather have the brightness, contrast, color accuracy, and vividness that the OLED, especially the extra resolution, delivers. And for me personally, gaming on a 60 hertz panel in a pinch really isn't a problem. In fact, because of the 3070 that's in both of these, you can actually game at native 4K res. Granted, not with very high settings, and you'll probably get around 30 frames per second, but with older titles, of course, you can get higher than 30 frames per second. I'm talking about current AAA stuff. So it's really a matter of personal preference. For me, I prefer the 4K OLED and know that I can output 4K 120 hertz or 1440, or I can game in this, of course, at 1080p, still at 60 hertz, but with everything set to high. The same applies here, even with the 1440p mode. Now let's focus on speaker quality. The Asus has the better overall experience, but does have a notorious popping issue, which you likely are not going to hear. And by the way, if you didn't notice, matte versus glossy, that's why I have the backlight off on the keyboards. If I bring it up, you will instantly see the blue light from the keyboard on the high gloss display on the right. But let's take a listen to the speakers on the Asus. Even though this isn't really a great audio test, you can still get an idea. Okay, now there was no popping there, but that's because there was no bass. So keep that in mind. Anything with bass, like the intro to my actual video that you're watching right now, that will make, essentially, it will crush the bass and it will sound like a little fart, a little popping noise. Now, for me, that's not a game breaker. For those of you who are going to tell me there's an update now, I'm up to date on everything. Today is March 6th, unless I'm losing my mind, Saturday. So there's no EQ setting or anything. I mean, you can dampen it, but you cannot eliminate the issue. However, it would not prevent me from recommending this laptop because, after all, if you follow my channel, you know when it comes to Ultrabooks, I went with the HP Spectre X360 13T because it checked every box, even though it has terrible speakers. So I'm willing to accept the popping speaker issue. I still think the audio on this laptop is top notch. And if you don't go beyond 50% volume, this is at 100% now, you are likely not going to run into that popping issue. I don't know if that makes you feel better about it, but it's something you should know. Now, on the right, by the way, both screens are 100% brightness. I don't know if I mentioned that. I should have. Let's take a listen to the Aero, which doesn't come anywhere near to being as loud as the Asus, but it doesn't have the distortion problem. Actually make sure that the volume is all the way up inside YouTube. I think that makes it incredibly obvious what I was pointing to, what I just said, which is that even though these speakers are notorious, people are, essentially calling defect I have myself in videos because there is an issue with them, they are better than what you're getting with the Aero. But if you're going to be made crazy by the popping noise, then, a little bit of OCD, anal, whatever you want to call it, then obviously the Aero isn't going to make you nuts. It's just not going to be very loud. Of course, you can use headphones with either one, and then the whole subject is moot. Now, let's move away from the display conversation because, again, I think it's clear if you want a game with a high refresh panel, you've got it here. If it's more important to you to have the better panel and not just a higher refresh rate, you're going with the Aero. And displays are important. For me, again, either one of these will live the majority of its life hooked up to an external display, but I would always rather know that I've got that panel. And again, this is personal preference. If I knew I didn't have an external monitor to use and I actually planned on gaming on this, then the 165 hertz QHD panel becomes more attractive in many ways. So just to make that clear, I don't think it's that one is better than the other. I think each suits a different customer, different person's needs. For me, the Aero 15 takes it because I'd rather have that OLED and have an external monitor for high refresh rate gaming. This is better for overall personal use. And as I mentioned, I have no problem gaming on a 60 hertz 4K display like this, since we finally have laptops that can actually do that. And you know all about audio quality, so let's jump out of this. Let's talk about the rest of the machines. So I said 1800 versus 2200. The AMD CPU, the Ryzen 9 5900HS at 35 watts is, at least synthetically, more powerful than the Intel Core i7 that drives this and the less expensive KC model. That is the Core i7 10870H, which is also an 8-core CPU. But I'll tell you right now, and I've said this in my previous videos, more stability on the right. And by the way, I've got to lower that brightness, don't I? Because it just looks blown out. And this, again, tells you about the difference in brightness for this machine, the Aero. I'm just going to see what we've got to go down to. Probably right around 50% in order to be at the same brightness, approximately. This one's a little bit brighter. I'm going to leave it like that. I could also lower the brightness on this if we really need it, but I don't think so. Anyway, the point is, because I think you want to know how bright this display can get, since already it's got a reputation for not being bright enough, right? And this kind of tells you, because this is 100%, this is 50%, you already get an idea. But to the hardware. Processor, the AMD is the, again, superior chip. It's brand new. The 10th gen chip here is new, but nowhere near as new as this. It runs hotter than the AMD. It draws more power. By the way, you will get less runtime from the Aero 15. On both of these, I'm going to stick to my 6-hour mark. Can you get more out of each of them? Of course. The battery life on the AMD-driven G15 is better than the Aero 15. No question about it, whether you go KC or XC, like I have here. But how much better is really a matter of personal use. For me, I've seen an hour, maybe an hour and a half more battery life out of the AMD, and that's with turning the iGPU mode off so that no power is going to the 3070. But that's pretty much it. And, you know, while I'd love to tell you that the battery life is more important to me than the overall performance and everything the machine delivers in terms of every box that I hope to check, because, again, I have no affiliation with Asus or Gigabyte, who knows going forward, but I'm trying to decide. I purchased these on which is going to be my next workhorse. You know, it's something where you need to find what is right for you, clearly. So the Nvidia and AMD marriage, I feel like, is a little bit more unstable. I've had more issues here than I've really had no issues with the Gigabyte. I had a Thunderbolt issue, but that was software related. And I think eventually, probably by next year, the maturation that AMD needs in the market will be there. They've been for a while now killing Intel, so that's the reason pricing has become so aggressive. Machines like this last year would have been $500 more, at least $400 more. But this year, because we actually have parity, competition now, it's a benefit to all of us as consumers. So you can't go wrong with either one in terms of the CPU-GPU combo, but do know better battery life lives on the left, you know, better stability on the right, but shorter runtime. Also, you do have trickle charge through both of the Type-C ports on the left. Also, the proprietary charger that comes with the Asus G15 will charge this machine up faster, about a little over an hour, about an hour and 25 minutes. Here you're looking at closer to 2 hours with its 230 watt power supply. Now, this does have a Thunderbolt 3 port, no Thunderbolt here. That's a big letdown for me personally, but unfortunately, no trickle charge through that Thunderbolt port. And this is a perfect example of where I can say, boy, every manufacturer finds a way to screw things up, don't they? The keyboards, both are RGB, but you do have per key lighting on the right with the Aero 15. You also have a numerical pad that may be important to you. I like having that. That's a personal preference. There's no question the Aero, it's pitched as being a content creation machine, and that's exactly what I think it delivers, a hybrid, whereas, of course, the G15 is squarely aimed at being a gaming machine first, but because of its color-accurate display and the fact that it doesn't look like a Martian vehicle, it does end up, I think, appealing, again, to both audiences, which is why I purchased both. So, you already know about the AMD chip in here being better than the Intel processor. The 3070s, which is probably the next most important, or even possibly more important than the 8-core processors, you got 5 more watts here. It's just the way they were designed. So that actually does give you a gaming edge with the Gigabyte. Now, is that edge enough for me to tell you go out and buy the Gigabyte instead? No, because again, you might prefer the G15 just because you want the higher refresh display, or just because you want the larger trackpad. By the way, both of these have fingerprint scanners, one here, one here. They're both, fingerprint scanners. People keep saying to me, how good are they? Neither is great. I don't rely on a fingerprint scanner. I generally look for Windows Hello IR cameras. Neither of these have those. However, the G15 has no webcam, which is ridiculous, but obviously I was able to look past that. So before anyone comments and says, you could just get a webcam, do you really not think I have a webcam? And with the Aero, I think it's a better than nothing little potato cam that you have above the power button there with a privacy switch. I mean, at least it feels like it's come from a time where they're aware there's a pandemic, let alone, webcams have been on laptops forever. So it's just bizarre that Asus does this in a pandemic. But hey, if it's cost cutting or whatever, I don't know. Either way, it wouldn't prevent me from recommending this machine, but it is really strange. So back to what I was saying, trackpad on the G15 is better, but I have no problems with the trackpad on the Aero. So, bigger may be better for you. For me personally, I'm looking for, again, the best balance. I find it here. The backlighting on the keyboard with the G15 apparently does not exist outside of the States unless you go with the 3080 white build, which don't do that. That's a complete waste of money. This Best Buy model does have RGB backlighting, and you can select the color. I'm not sure why right now I don't have, I turned it off. There we go. So I have blue. I could select any color, but it is a uniform, single. You can't do per key. Of course, with the Aero, you can do per key. So if that's your jam, then, jump into the control center and do whatever you want to do. So essentially you go into the Fusion tab and, I can make this something incredibly annoying, breathing wave. I mean, whatever you want, let's just go through it. You're not going to be able to do this. Now, do I care about this? No, this is one of those features I couldn't give a crap about. So it's really a matter of what you're looking for. That's how I look at this. But, some of you will really care. The raindrop is a cool effect, a little, again, it's a matter of personal preference. I did just realize I have this on battery saver, which is why it's probably acting a little wonky. Let's go ahead and shut that off. Sorry about that. And it just boosted brightness on me again. Thanks for nothing, laptop. But at any rate, something to be aware of with the keyboards. Now, in terms of the actual typing experience, I do prefer the G15. However, that does not mean I have not become acclimated to the Gigabyte Aero 15. I have. So I think you get a more satisfying, there's a little more key travel. I like the feel of the typing experience on the G15 more than the Aero, but not enough that would sway my decision one way or the other. The dedicated buttons up here to get to the Armory crate, it's good to have a hotkey like that. Do you need it? No. There's none here, but I could map something, right, if I wanted to, obviously. So, but here's the thing. The Gigabyte Control Center is pretty much terrible. The Armory crate is better. The Control Center more dynamic because it covers, also updating, but I do not recommend using the Smart Utility Update. That is what actually killed my Thunderbolt 3 port on the KC model. At least that's what I suspect. It was something that was installed by Gigabyte. So I would tread lightly on their drivers that they're pushing. Stick to the website rather than the utility until they get their act together. The dashboard, because that's what you're looking at with the Armory crate on the left, gives you essentially performance profiles, and you can switch in and out of them. It's more dynamic than what you're getting out of the Gigabyte Control Center. No question about it. I mean, yeah, I can step up and boost this, the CPU and GPU performance, but we have to be on a different power plan than power saver. And that's easy to manage. But the whole point here is that both have, I would say, janky software, but Asus definitely does a better job also with the My Asus software update as well. So just be aware, okay? It's something that you are going to want to be aware of. Go ahead, switch over to high performance. I am up to date. Show you that right now because so many questions. People are always like, is everything up to date, Ed? Are you sure you have the latest firmware, latest BIOS? Yes, I'm sure. I'm positive. Unless it actually happened right now, and it didn't. And look, show latest version only. And there's nothing. So, moral of the story is when it comes to software, I found that while I really don't like the control center on the right with the Gigabyte, the overall experience, I mean, I've had a few blue screens of death with the G15. That just hasn't happened over here on the right. And when it comes to gaming, because we're getting a little more wattage out of the Aero, that does mean you can game a little bit, I would say, with a little more prowess. My video editing is also a little bit faster. It's not a huge difference. I'm talking about exporting in 4K, but it's enough that I care about it. So let me turn off the stupid lights. So that's important to know. But again, when it comes to gaming, expect to, on both of these, 1440p, everything is maxed out. You'll be fine. If you want to go to the 4K native resolution, as I was saying, you're going to be looking at 30 frames, really at best. Possibly a few more depending on title, possibly a few less. If they're older games, then that frame rate is going to go up, but you can always drop this down to, I mean, a 1080p max everything out. Also here, 1080p max everything out. That's the beauty of the 30 series generation or 3000 RTX GPUs, in my opinion. This whole getting rid of the branding associated with the wattage they get, I think they tried to make it less confusing, but they've made it more confusing. Feels like some sort of Apple move. At any rate, the point is that they're both going to do an incredibly solid job at gaming and rendering, video editing, photo editing. You're not going to have a problem on either of these. But ultimately, in benchmarking, the Aero has eclipsed the G15. That is the XC model that I'm comparing here. The KC model did not. 3D Mark scores were somewhere originally over 9,000, a little over 9,000 for the G15. The KC model was a little under 9,000. Here we're right over 9,000, 91, 9,200 on any given benchmark. This machine with driver updates has actually dropped now to under 9,000. So this synthetically will outperform, at least in 3D Mark, what we have on the left. And that's not because of the additional RAM. It does get some points because I have upgraded the Kingston NVMe 1 terabyte that's included with this, but the 1 terabyte NVMe inside of the Asus outperforms that Kingston out of the box. But that's not, at the end of the day, the reason we're getting better overall scores. It plays into it, but again, it's that extra wattage on the GPU. In terms of other things to know, the G15 stays quiet, stays cool. The Aero does get hotter, but it can stay quiet, which is unique on an Intel laptop. And that's something Gigabyte really focused on with the Aero 15 line because it was known for thermal throttling. So they had to get their act together, and they did. New cooling system. And I have to say, when either of these are under load, video editing or gaming, you're going to be plugged in. Obviously, you cannot get full performance without connecting the respective power brick. They're going to be loud, but both have the ability to be silent when they're being used as productivity machines, which is a beautiful thing. The AMD, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more, but again, shockingly, the Intel machine, which draws more power, is able to shut up as well. So that's a good thing. But remember, battery life is better here, and you have the ability to trickle charge. No trickle charge here. That just kills me. Gigabyte, I said it once, I said it twice, 3 times. Why the hell didn't you do it? But in the same vein, why didn't Asus give us HDMI 2.1? You have an HDMI 2.1 port here. You do not here. You have a DisplayPort Mini, albeit a true DisplayPort 1.4 port on here. You've got 2 Type-C multi-USB ports that can serve as power delivery up to 100 watts. Of course, DisplayPort 1.4. The Gigabyte used to have one of those. They took it away. I don't know why. They should have left it there. They replaced it with a dedicated DisplayPort, mini DisplayPort, which is good, but again, trickle charge, man. Come on. Other things to know. We have a micro SD card slot on here. We have a full-size SD card slot on here, something, again, that appeals to me. Now, I could perfectly, happily live with the micro SD card slot, so I don't think that's changing my choice. It's not, but it might change yours. We have Type A USB ports, of course. We also have, what am I forgetting? Of course, an Ethernet port on both of these machines. So both, through different methods, will use DisplayPort to deliver 4K 120 hertz gaming. Although some of you may think that's ridiculous, you can do it for real, especially older titles. Looks great. These machines can pull it off, which is what is amazing about them on the gaming side beyond what they can do alone, you know, as a single unit. And then on the video editing side, as I said, and photo editing, really, really close, but slight edge goes to the Aero. Now, are there some areas where the AMD chip's raw performance, which is better than the Intel chip, will come to life? Sure there are. But in my personal applications, it doesn't. So again, synthetic benchmarks don't help me with work or play at the end of the day. That just happened to rhyme. What can I say? So be aware. So I think the more complete package is the Aero 15. You've got all the modern ports, but I do want to remind you that even though this has HDMI 2.1 and this has HDMI 2.0, you're still going to need to use the display ports to leverage the GPUs. I mean, in most cases. So be aware of that, okay? And in terms of build quality, this is an aluminum, plastic, or magnesium combo. It feels mostly like plastic, still feels solidly made, well built. The Aero, on the other hand, is all aluminum. So build quality, in my opinion, goes to the Aero. The Aero's a little bit heavier. They're both a little over 4 pounds, with the brick even a little heavier. I think this is 4.2 without the brick. I think this is 4.4 or 4.5. The Aero generally seems to feel heavier, not just because it is, but because of that all aluminum build. I also happen to like the bezel on the Aero more because it does have a rubber liner that runs around it. We don't have that here. We have plastic. And then for those of you worried about the bezel on the bottom and the design with the ventilation, I get it. Over time, who knows? Look, I haven't even talked about the fact that 8 gigs of RAM here is soldered, and we're 2742 in, 43, 44. Now, for many of you, the soldered RAM is not going to be an issue. And for most of you that are watching this, you already knew that. That 8 gigs of the 16 in this machine is permanent for life. If that breaks for any reason, which is rare, but if it happens, and especially out of warranty, you've shit the bed, so to speak. You're going to have a tremendous bill. So extended warranty on either of these, I highly recommend, and I generally don't recommend extended warranties, but I don't really trust either manufacturer when it comes to build quality, but I have had more build quality issues with the Asus. So if you haven't watched my coverage. But be aware of that. So dual channel support ends at 16 gigs. So while you can max this machine out at 40 gigs with the one available RAM slot that you can upgrade with a 32 gig DIMM, your dual channel support ends at 16 gigs. Here, you can go up to 64 dual channel. This machine has 32 right now, which for me is enough, but I love that down the road, if I want to upgrade to 64, which I might, I maintain dual channel performance. So again, food for thought, and just it speaks to upgradability, and one manufacturer may be expecting their product to last longer, or one manufacturer not trying to get you to upgrade as soon as the other. That might be the best way of putting it. Now, for those of you who will defend soldered RAM, I don't know why you would. Thin and light, yes. In Ultrabooks, totally understandable. Some of you will point out smartphones, tablets, also understandable. Those do not have the lifespan, in my opinion, of laptops, especially machines that are this big, this powerful. The soldered RAM makes absolutely no sense. It's kind of like the lack of webcam. If you try to justify that, you're on Kool-Aid. Doesn't mean the G15 isn't a great machine. So, what do we know? Both have great panels, tailored to different but overlapping audiences, as I've stated. Speaker performance, even though we've got a flaw with the G15, is better, louder, better soundstage than the Aero. Keyboard experience, the typing experience, I prefer the G15, but I prefer the entire package we're getting here with the numerical keypad and the per key RGB lighting. I mean, come on. In this case, I feel like more is more for me personally. And also, no print screen button. Yes, we all know there's a workaround. Who the hell wants a workaround? I mean, that's just a giant pain in the ass and totally strange. Okay? Totally, totally strange. By the way, RTX game-ready drivers installed here, studio drivers installed here. Have I tried both? Yes, benchmarking has been basically the same. So studio drivers are pitched as just being really more stable, to my knowledge, and they should yield better performance in things that are studio related. So Autodesk, basically anything architecture related, anything graphic design related, anything editing related, video or still alike, DaVinci Resolve, all of those things, kind of mentioned that already, didn't I? The studio drivers should give you more of a Quadro-esque experience, but gaming is not screwed. That's the point, as the screen actually dims. But overall, I personally do prefer the Aero 15. And I mean, there's so many good things about the G15, but now that we're on even footing, even if it's more expensive, 2200 versus 1800, I can't help but find a reason to justify the Asus or Asus ROG or ROG G15 Zephyrus, especially missing Thunderbolt 3, something that is so 3 years ago, but so necessary in my workflow. I have a ton of external NVMe drives that, even though this machine's Type-C ports can deliver nice throughput, we're talking about 800 megabytes a second, solid, here I can get over a gig a second. And then let's not forget docking. If, like me, you're not going to always be gaming, and you do have a Thunderbolt 3 or 4 dock, they are rolling out those Thunderbolt 4 docks, not really much of a difference, except for 8K video support. One plug does it all. Yeah, power, you'll still need power, but that's true of either of these. But then one cable will do everything. It will connect you to that hub, which will have all of your peripherals. In my case, all of my external storage, my mouse, my keyboard. I mean, why would I want to give that up? Now, would I give it up if the G15 smoked it, the Aero? Absolutely. Because I'm not, crazy. I'm not in love with either of these. I'm not trying to, go on a date or get married. I'm trying to game and, do work. So with that in mind, even if I had to have 4 or 5 cables coming out of this, or just, use a regular hub, which you can, they're a little bit more messy, not as consistent throughput for 4K output as well, which is a requirement for me, then I would go with the G15. But the Thunderbolt 3 here is a winning recipe when I put together the sum of all of the parts of the Aero 15. So, again, gaming, essentially a wash. You can check out my gaming demos of both machines. Well, actually, the gaming demo for the Aero 15 XC in this review isn't up yet, but it will be soon. And, again, they're really, really close, slight edge here. Productivity, you have a little more battery life here, but you may encounter more blue screens of death. Also, the screen flickering has stopped for me. Now, some of you thought that was when I connect the power to it, which is when the refresh rate changes from 60 hertz to 165. That is not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about it doing it on its own when either on power or off power. So nothing to do with changing the power supply limitations or the ceiling. So just something to be aware of. The beauty is that I don't feel you can really go wrong with either of these. They're both fantastic. I think that they, as I've stated, overlap in terms of their capability, no question about it. Upgradability, I didn't mention, besides the RAM, both have 2 NVMe slots, so you can upgrade those. I've already thrown in a Sabrent, well, these are the 2 drives I've thrown in. That'll be another video. Sabrent Rocket Q 4 terabyte, and the OS I cloned onto a Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus, even though this is next gen, that is 4th gen speed, technically, which this doesn't support, neither does no mobile chipsets do yet. I like the future proofing there because, you know, in that Gen 4 performance, you do have over 5,000 on the read-write, which is just crazy. But right now, yeah, this has a little bit of an edge. This is over 3,000 on the read-write. This is close, but not quite. And that's why the NVMe that does come stock here is better than the one in the KC model or the XC model. Keep that in mind. So you're going to want to upgrade that. But that's pretty much it in terms of upgradability. Of course, RAM here, you can go up to 64 gigs. And yeah, so right now I've got 1 terabyte here, stock, and I've got 6 in this machine. But both are easy to open up. Phillips screws, T6 on the right. One person asked me about breaking the warranty. Now, does it void the warranty? Good question. I don't really know. Oh, before I close this and do the last final tour of the body and wrap this thing up here, on that note, which I'm going to speak to, there were 2 screws on the Gigabyte that had stickers on them, which would imply that penetrating those stickers somehow would void the warranty. But keep in mind that Gigabyte gives you 2 thermal pads for NVMe drives. So very mixed signals. Don't rely on me. Reach out to Gigabyte. I've reached out. No response yet. But then again, look, I have no relationship with either of these companies. It's not my doing. Hey, I'll be friends if they want to be friends. But I talked about the ventilation here. I didn't talk about the LED notifications. Now, on the right is the single LED right near the charging port on the Aero. We've got 3 lights here. If you're over 6 feet, or I'm going to say 6 feet tall or more, and I'm completely guesstimating, you are going to physically see the lights while you're working or gaming or whatever on this machine. Even if you're below 6 feet tall, you're going to see the lights reflecting off of the plastic chin, the bezel. That may make you nuts. It doesn't bother me, but enough people have complained that I would be, you know, leaving something out if I did not make mention. So now let's close them up and let's talk about how ugly they are. This stays lit, by the way, which is cute, but, you know, sucks some juice, obviously. All right, and that's an OLED in the background if you're trying to figure it out. So the G15, let's start with it. Its little rainbow finish, which may or may not come across. I'm trying to make it happen, oh, there it is. I am not a fan of this stuff. I mean, I'm all for RGB, but I don't know what the hell this is supposed to be. Now, the kids, and I'm not that old, but the kids may love this. I don't know. Most gaming laptops are hideous. This one, as I keep saying, isn't ugly enough to turn me off. We've got the Republic of Gamers branding right there. As I've mentioned, the LEDs are built into the ventilation right there. It's a nice machine. I mean, if I thought it was hideous, I would not have purchased it. I purchased both of these with the intent of keeping one. You know, the KC had the problem with the Thunderbolt port, which is why it's gone. On the right side, Kensington lock, ventilation, micro SD card slot. By the way, one of you asked, does the micro SD card go in upside? You know, like you don't have to flip it upside down. It does. And I know where you live. I don't mean that literally. I know what you mean. That's what the expression is meant to mean there. Some laptops do force you to flip it. It's a little stupid. It's just the way they designed the board, the card reader. In this case, right side up is the right side. Type A USB port. The left side is cluttered. It's where all the action is. So the quick charger, the power port right there, HDMI 2.0B, Ethernet, another Type A port, 2 Type C ports that, as I mentioned, are combo ports for DisplayPort, power delivery, all of that good stuff. And then your headphone, microphone combo jack. I'm almost losing my voice here, it seems. Ventilation, you know, this stays cooler. I've mentioned that. The machine does stay cooler than the Aero. That may matter more to you. But the Aero is pretty much sheer on the bottom, which is also a first of its kind for me personally. Phillips screws all around. You will have to pluck these little suckers out to get inside. I don't know that I'm going to do that because I don't think I'm going with this machine if you haven't put that together yet. As good as the G15 is, still sold out everywhere, the Aero XC is a little bit more my speed. Heavier, as I mentioned, definitely feels like a little bit more of a solid laptop. I'm not in love with this either. It also checks that not ugly enough to make me run away box, which, trust me, I wish these machines were actually good looking, but we're not buying them for design, or at least I'm not. But this one is less ugly in every possible way than the G15, no question. I don't know what these little lines are about, but it's pretty sedate compared to the glitter. I hate glitter, by the way, so the fact that the lid resembles glitter is just, oh, glitter is the devil. But yeah, more solid feeling on the backside. I'll flip it this way so you don't get too confused. We have an Aero logo right there. Get that into focus. All ventilation on the rear. Sounds odd aloud, but... And all ventilation here as well. I said it's kind of sheer. This thing catches hair like it's its job. I mean, God forbid, this comes near my arms or legs or my pets. I mean, this thing, I could see needing to clean this out. All T6 screws, I forget how many, but they're all around the chassis. Pretty easy to pop open. The two that I was mentioning that had the seal on them right here. So not sure what kind of mixed signal Gigabyte is sending with that, but they're sending it. So let's start with the right side of the machine for uniformity purposes. We've got ventilation, the power port. I'm actually wondering, looking at that, if I got this together properly. I think so. Our full-size SD card slot, which is UHS-2 certified, so the speeds on this fairly good, up to 300 megabytes a second. The magical Thunderbolt 3 port that so many of you don't care about, and then some of you, like me, do care about. It's a must-have for me. Sorry, it's 2021. Cut the shit. I don't know how a laptop can be $2,000 and not have Thunderbolt 3 or 4 on board when, little Ultrabooks have it that are underpowered, little go-everywhere machines. 2 Type-A USB ports. We flip the machine around, and again, I feel like it's just a better balance than what you've got with the G15 being so crowded on the left. The HDMI 2.1, which can natively, again, deliver 4K, 120 hertz. No 8K because, it can deliver 8K. Listen to me, brain farting. None of this is scripted if you didn't know that. So you can get 8K out of this. That is the main advantage of this being HDMI 2.1. We're talking about just watching video. I don't have an 8K TV. You probably don't have one either. So really future-proofing at its finest. DisplayPort 1.4. This is where the magic happens. Gaming at 4K 120 hertz, completely doable. Not with everything maxed out, obviously, but doable, which is still amazing from a 15-inch, 4.5-pound laptop. USB Type-A, headphone microphone combo jack, and Ethernet. By the way, the Wi-Fi chipset on both of these, I did not mention, is exactly the same, and it performs pretty much exactly the same. It's not the best experience I've ever had, but it's near the top of the performance of my Orbi Wi-Fi 6, the AX6000 mesh systems capability. So that's pretty good. I have 500 down. This pulls in anywhere between 300 and 400 down. So it's pretty good. It's not bad. So which is right for you? I have no clue. For me, having spent as much time with both of these machines, I believe I got this on February 12th. I've had this only for a few days. But I was working on the KC before it, so I know what to expect. Basically, unless something tragic happens in the next week, I will be going with the Aero 15 in the XC flavor. I think the KC is a bargain at $1,600. For those of you wondering, is the 3060 that inferior to the 3070? No, it's not. The 3060 is the most underrated player in the game, folks. I think it's the bargain. It's where the magic happens. However, if you have the budget, you want more future-proofing, you want to actually be able to game in 4K, which might sound crazy, but it's not, trust me, then go 3070. That's really the answer. And there is a 3060 model on here too, $1,500. It doesn't have the same display, doesn't have the same design. Well, most of the ugliness is still there, but just be aware. But yeah, right now I'm leaning towards the Aero 15 XC, again, just because it is the more well-rounded package, even with less battery life, even with the slower charge time, even with the inability to trickle charge, it still is as close to checking every single box that I'm trying to check. The G15, it sets a new standard in many ways, takes a few steps back. Also, I'm very excited to see what Asus does next year. Again, when AMD is a little bit more optimized on the software side of things. Because, again, for me personally, the tangibility, I think that's a word, tangibleness, or we'll just say the ability to actually utilize the synthetic performance capability difference of that AMD CPU is not realized in my current workflow or gaming. So while every fanboy and girl could say AMD or bust, well, to me, it's bust right now because this is very promising. I don't think I've ever seen or touched an AMD machine that I could say could actually best an Intel one. So good times we're living in, outside of the fact that it's a fucking pandemic. But at least there are vaccines, right? I guess that's where I'm coming to. The circle. Life is like a circle. So very promising things down the road. I think next year is going to be very interesting. But in the same vein, I don't think Intel's done. I think people are starting to eat their cake. And, Nvidia, if the acquisition of ARM goes through, I think both Intel and AMD are both going to shit their pants. So get ready for that show, folks. And if anyone after this video is curious about, if a Mac product competes with these, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry you watched this video. Pretty much rounds it out. Both are great. I don't think you can go wrong. You know which way I'm leaning. I'm leaning right. Don't be misguided by that. I just mean the Aero 15. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.